You're paddling upstream in a river that wants to carry you exactly where you want to go. And you can't see it because your attention has been captured, not by your heart, but by somebody else's intention, which has captured your mind. Conversations for change, because the world is ready. Today I've been thinking about some concepts that I have been visiting and revisiting fairly consistently over the last 11 or 12 months. And I've been thinking about it from the point of view of how life works and what it is and what it takes to get to the heart of the matter. And when I think of the heart of the matter, just that expression itself kind of tells us, because of the way we think about it, number one, that the heart of the matter is the central core of something. And number two, that the heart is central to pretty much everything. And I think that is a part of what I've come to really understand in a completely different way over this last year of my life. And I guess I have to say it began with a series of painful events which were not happening to me and were completely out of my control, but which were affecting the people I care about. And during the initial phase of that process, I was introduced to David Hawkins' book, Letting Go, The Pathway of Surrender. That book has been pivotal in transforming a lot of things in my life. And it's taken me this last almost full year now to actually begin to understand and integrate and see what has been happening and what it is that has changed and how I live now as compared to how I lived before last year. And I won't say that the book is the only thing that has been transforming me, because that would not be true. But the book has played a very powerful role in giving me a new perspective. And I think it comes down again to this whole question of how we live and the way we live. And the whole idea of letting go, the pathway of surrender, is that when we allow the feelings within us to come up and be released through us, it shifts everything. It gives us the freedom to actually step into the now moment from a completely different perspective. And it always teaches us something and shows us something about the way we are holding on to or blocking the things that we feel we need either to protect us in the case of holding on, or the things that we are seeking in the case of things we are blocking. And in a way, it's really an extension of this whole idea that Dr. Hawkins introduced in Power versus Force, that says essentially that we live within a vibrational universe. And the level to which we can align ourselves to the higher powers which can lift us is the level to which we can let go of the use of force, which is the power of pushing against or toward. And for me, what I've come to understand is that after some very intense periods where I was reviewing the material and going over it on a very regular basis, daily, and then stepping away and letting go for a little while and then coming back, my perspective has actually consistently and completely shifted. I would say before, in fact, I know that before I went through this process, I wasn't capable fully of stepping into a place where I actually desired the highest and best for all in the situations I was encountering in my life. I was still holding on to the idea that somehow in a situation that seemed on the outside adversarial, if my seeming adversary were to get what, quote unquote, they wanted, that it would mean that I could not have what I wanted. And I no longer hold that perspective at all. In fact, it's so completely gone from me that the entire opposite has now appeared. That is to say, in situations where I used to be defensive and expecting to have to protect myself, I feel instead overwhelming unconditional love for the whole situation and for everybody in it. Now, that didn't happen in a day or a week. It didn't even really happen in a year, because I have been on this path of trying to rise myself up to the highest version of myself for a long time, decades. But I haven't been consistently able to hold that energy where I wanted it. I've had too many triggers and too many other energies within me that had not been resolved. I think that's the simplest way to say that. And so I started thinking today about this whole shift into the idea of surrender and where we see it in the world and where it's calling us to go. And part of what triggered me to think about it was coming up with a list of words and seeing how they relate to how we behave in the world and where our actions take us, as opposed to where we might want to be going. And what I realized as I looked at it was that what we're talking about really is the difference between the heart and the mind. And we have all been so trained to use our minds as our navigation system, as our feedback system, and as our method for accomplishing, that we have failed to recognize that it's actually the heart that has the power to take us where we want to go. This doesn't mean that the mind can't steer or can't provide direction. But what it does mean is that the mind cannot carry us to our intended outcome, because our intended outcome at a higher level is always and infinitely and intimately connected to the heart, to the longing for that which serves the highest and best for all of humanity, all of life, for that which recognizes the sacred and the divine in all things. And that is the piece that has fallen away in our modern culture. So in a way you could say it's heart versus mind, or it's power versus force, or it's trust versus faith, because trust is the knowing in the heart and faith is the mind hoping for trust. Or you could say It is surrender versus manipulation. And surrender is such an interesting word because it has so many connotations depending at what level you are encountering it. And most of us are not in the place where we are seeing surrender as the thing we do is a positive that carries us into the allowing of grace. Most of us are still in the place of either striving or victimhood, where surrender is either giving our power away to authority or giving up. But the real pathway of surrender is the pathway through to the sacred and to the divine grace that comes when we trust the heart. The problem is we can't get there from the place of fear, anxiety, and fight or flight or any of those places where we are still caught in the energy of the mind's response. We first have to move into the heart in order to actually experience true surrender, because the heart is governing our feelings and the mind is cut off from that knowing. And most of us have been raised in a culture that teaches us to defend and protect first. And I think this comes from a deeper challenge that we face within ourselves of believing that the world we live in is hostile, dangerous, and working against us, when the truth of nature is not that at all. I recently saw a quote from the Pachamama Alliance, whom I have known of and been engaged with off and on for decades, which said it so beautifully when they talked about the difference between belonging and controlling. And when we learn that nature is here to give us everything we need, when we have found our place in it, to be the helpers and the supporters and the lovers of all that is beautiful, which we already are, in that moment we transform everything about our relationship to the world we live in. But we cannot get there from the place of thinking that we have to solve the problem by controlling everything outside of us. The only way we can get there is by learning to go within and finding the pathway that calls us forward in the way that is most aligned with all the great gifts and opportunities and callings within our own hearts that want to carry us into this new world. And in a funny way, this whole idea of surrender really comes down to coming face to face with the truth that everything we give our attention to expands. Because ultimately it forces us to understand and recognize that all those things we are so certain are so bad and terrible and dangerous are simply places where we can put our energy that does nothing to serve us on the path of creating something new. But we've been so conditioned to believe that there is something that we must do that is out there to fix the problem, that we abandon the most important, vital, and brilliant part of ourselves, which is our own inner calling for something divine and wonderful that we have the power to create. And each of us carries this gift but only each of us can access it and create with it. We can't do it for each other. We can't do it for someone else. We can only do it for ourselves and then bring it out into the world and explore and express and exchange and interact and co-create with everybody else. But so long as we are moved by the impulses of what is out there in such a way that we are dropping and letting go of that inner knowing and losing the sense of self that gives us the empowerment to become that force of nature that has the power to transform anything, we are essentially neutralizing ourselves, making ourselves powerless. And when you look out at the world, you begin to get a hint of that now as you see that more and more energy from the outer is being used to attempt to distract you away and into fear, frustration, anger, all of those negative, lower vibrational emotions. You really can't miss it anymore. And when you begin to understand that level of bombardment in itself is the giveaway. It is the evidence that is telling you that there is no reason for you to keep looking in that direction. That the direction that you want to look into in order to serve yourself and the humanity and the world that you love is within. And from there, the inspiration for how and what and where and when and why will all come. But until you get that spark that connects you back to your own knowing and to your own sense of that unconditional love that holds all of us, you're paddling upstream in a river that wants to carry you exactly where you want to go. And you can't see it because your attention has been captured, not by your heart, but by somebody else's intention, which has captured your mind, by somebody else's demand for your attention, which has captured your focus. It's a tricky, slippery slope, but learning the art of allowing what is going on out in the world without allowing it to consume you while holding your vision of what's possible is the only path that can lead us to what we want, to what we truly in our heart desire. And the further down that path we go, the more we surrender to that inner divinity that calls us to be loving, to be kind, to step up to our highest version of ourself, the more we want to give that to everybody around us, even those who are caught in the fear and clamoring for our attention. We lose the whole idea of enemy because we understand that we are all part of the vastness of the all that is this divine life. And that's the real secret of the pathway of surrender. And it's also really the heart of the matter, because it's where we're all going. And until we can come to terms within ourselves with the idea that we are worthy to go down those roads, to allow the river to carry us to the perfect destination that allows us to contribute in the way that is the most delicious and rewarding and wonderful for us and gives the most to everybody around us, until we are there, we are still working on the process of letting go and surrendering those locked up emotions within us, which are seeking release. And the way we know when our work is getting lighter and when we are getting closer is that fewer and fewer things can trigger us, and that our joy quotient simply begins to rise, and our desire to be of service rises with it.